Aloha and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Got Your Six podcast. This 6-question podcast brings together high performers to share their methods, strategies, and ideas, delivered in an informative and, most importantly, actionable way that'll help you lead yourself and those around you from the battlefield to the boardroom. Coming to you every episode, I'm your host, Tony Nash. And into the breach.
Nothing mentioned on this podcast is an endorsement or opinion of the Department of Defense.
I got your six, we got your back. Got your six, we got your back. Got your six, we got your back. I got your six.
Sixers, absolute, unbelievable treat today. I feel like for those that are watching the video, I have to talk like this before I introduce our guests. Austin von Letkemann is our guest. I know you've heard of him. I know you've seen him. But he's always about mandatory fun. Austin, thank you so much for coming on the Got Your Six podcast, my man.
Hey, man, I really appreciate you having me on. And, I appreciate the content shout out, too. It's great.
Hey, so you've been in a while. I know you're kind of starting over. Well, we won't say starting over again, but at a different point in your leadership journey, because you came in enlisted, right? And now you're essentially on the Mustang track.
Yep.
As you've kind of gone through that, how did you bring content and your understanding, your observation, and leveraging that through your content, more or less?
Well, it's funny. So not that long ago, I actually looked back on my original content. If you go to my TikTok and you scroll, I've got over 1,200 videos on there now. So I've got a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got a lot of stuff. But I scrolled all the way back to the very beginning to kind of, it hasn't been very long that I've been making content, but I feel like I've gone through a couple evolutions through the process. But yeah, so I scrolled back. It took me 26 videos before any of my videos did anything, right? And I think the first video that I had, it got like 35,000 views, which is pretty solid, honestly. I'm still pretty happy when a video gets 35,000. I like seeing, obviously, the videos go viral. But, it was Army content. I originally started making like parenting content, fitness content, and I'm kind of branching out into that too, especially on Instagram. But
well, you also have a bachelor's degree too in sports and health science.
Yeah. And so the fitness content is, I thought for sure that would be, my ticket as far as content creation goes. But the Army stuff is what hit, and really, I think it's my level of empathy. I truly try and lead hard with empathy, and me being able to empathize with people and vocalize and verbalize situations that we all find ourselves in that none of us like. That's what sticks with people. That's people, and I'm playing on people's emotions. I'm playing on people's frustrations, and they love it. They love it.
Where does that come from, and understanding that level of empathy to kind of help relate and, carry a conversation when it's hard to have those conversations, especially around some of the topics and content of what we do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I mean, I really think back. So I've been in the Army since 2012. I went to Fort Hood first. I was at Fort Lewis next. And then I got stationed at Fort Sill. And I'm back in Texas. I won't say which one specifically because some of my leaders that I had at this organization are probably still in the military. But during one of those times, it was a very dark time in my life, and I saw a lot of kind of the worst that leadership has to offer. A lot of my content comes from me thinking back on that dude who was literally a scared specialist and thinking, I can vocalize these frustrations now, and I can make other people feel heard. And that's what it's been. I get comments all the time. I get messages on Instagram. People send me emails saying like, hey, what you're doing really helps me out. It makes me feel like I'm not crazy because you're bringing up the frustrations that we all have. And so that feels really good. I hope that answers that question though.
No, it does. And then it also has to be somewhat cathartic and almost to an extent like rejuvenating, because you're able to kind of tap into a spot, like you were saying, that is dark in your life, and you're making something of that. So you're helping other people at the same point.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cathartic. I love that you say that, and it's really cool because as well as I do, the higher you go in rank, certain things don't make sense still, but a lot of stuff becomes more clear and a lot of stuff starts to make sense. Policy that you were like, why is this like this? You make sergeant, you make staff sergeant, you become an officer and you're on a battalion staff. And now you're like, oh, wow, okay, I guess that does make sense. Some things I still don't agree with, some things still don't make sense, but you get what I'm saying. And so being able to give, especially young troops, a look behind the curtain a little bit, because, I make a lot of videos and they're like, yeah, man, this all sucks and it's dumb. And sometimes I get to pump the brakes a little bit and I get to say, look, guys, I poke fun at these policies, but some of these policies do have a place. My favorite example is the toaster video, right? I was like, hey, please go work on this $10 million tank, but you cannot have a toaster in your room. Well, the problem is if you give 100 troops a toaster and put them in a barracks room, one of them will burn down the barracks. You know what I mean? And explaining that to people and seeing the light bulb turn on for them is very rewarding.
Yeah, it has to be, right?
Yeah.
Because you're also kind of pushing people's beliefs and understanding of the situation. And I know you're a massive fan of like getting out of a comfort zone, because through comedy and through the humor that you create and you transcend through your videos, you're able to really challenge those long heard beliefs. Have people kind of come back to you and said like, oh man, you've kind of really changed how I've approached this situation? You've kind of alluded to that a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, I have people, I've had many people in the comments specifically that have said, I've never thought of it like that. And then what's cool is when I have other leaders who are in the military and they come onto the comments too, and they're like, hey man, you guys need to listen to this guy because what he's saying is going to save you a lot of frustration, a lot of heartache. And gosh, there's so many reasons why I do. I'm almost speaking to my past self. I was angry. As a lower enlisted soldier and even as an E5. As a staff sergeant, I started to mature a little bit. I stopped, thinking too much of myself, probably humbled myself a little bit. And so things got easier, but I truly am. I'm speaking to my old self. Everything's going to be okay. You don't need to die on every hill kind of thing. You know what I mean?
And that allows for a clear conversation to be had, because you have, and I love that you opened up with empathy, because you have so much empathy for yourself. I think a lot of us talk when we're like, oh, I botched this, I messed this up, I did all these things. We talk so terribly to ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we were to talk to another person like that, no one would even look at us. They would think that we're absolutely like off the wall. And we shouldn't, you shouldn't be a leader.
Yeah,
but it's really interesting when you pull back. How have you kind of allowed yourself to be empathetic to your past frustrations, misgivings outside of comedy?
Well, I've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of work in counseling. I am a huge, massive advocate for counseling. And for anybody in the military currently, Military One Source, great resource. Your local EVH, great, embedded behavioral health. Your local EVH, great resource. Use it. Even if you're not currently going through something, a counselor can help you make breakthroughs in yourself personally, can help reframe the way you see things. Probably the most powerful thing a counselor gave me. I came into a counselor a couple years ago. I was pissed, super pissed, right? At my boss. My boss had done something. And I told my counselor, I said, my boss did this thing because of this. And they said, whoa. You can't say that. You can't read minds. This is literally how the conversation went. They said, you don't know why your boss did that. Did you ask? And I said, no, of course I didn't ask. And they're like, yeah, you didn't ask because you're pissed. And I said, and so now I think about that, man. You cannot attribute thought or emotion to another person's actions. You have to ask them. Yeah. You can't just say, well, Tony Nash did X because of X. Only you know what you did and for the reason you did it, And so that was really powerful.
Yeah. And you're also providing like action when you talk about, and you kind of like pull back. It's like, to write clearly, you have to write a lot, right? You can't just, it's not the first draft that gets sent out. You're like what is it? Mark Twain, Winston Churchill all say, like, I would have read a shorter letter if I had more time. And you think, and you're like, wait, what? And you look at that and it's like, you really, the key you use the most on the keyboard is the delete key, because you're trying to refine this idea. How do you go through idea generation as you create content? Is it just kind of combing through the go ahead.
Man, that is such a good question. Very few people ask me this question. So a lot of my content ideas come from the comments now. If I'm really stumped, I keep somewhere between 20 and 30 videos queued up. And then I've had as many as 100 before. If I have that many, a lot of them aren't super great, and I end up deleting a bunch of them. But yeah, I keep a bunch of videos queued up. But how I create content, it literally, a lot of times I will just, an idea will pop in my head. Right before I got on here, I made a video that I'm going to drop sometime in the next week about toilet guards. How Sergeant Major comes in and he's like, man, somebody's blowing up the toilets. You know what? We're putting a guard on the toilets now. And so, and it just popped into my head. I don't know why, but my brain, I guess,
that's gonna be good.
Like that. It's the one benefit of ADHD.
Yeah. And how do you do you keep like a running notes of content of like, hey, this is kind of the idea. This is how I want to structure it, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so if somebody sends me an idea, I will screenshot it, and I have a folder in my phone that I keep those, and there's anywhere from 30 to 60 screenshots in there at any given time. And so if I'm stumped and I cannot think of content, I'll pull a couple ideas from that. But, I mean, you're a content creator. It's hard sometimes. It's really hard. I mean, it's even, I imagine it's harder for you because you got to find another person. I'm literally talking to myself in those videos. But finding ways to make the same little snippet into multiple videos, finding different styles, different ways to deliver it has been fun. It's been interesting, and it's given me some of my best material, I think. The Veteran Tim skits, people love those. And that was me experimenting with new content.
And that's kind of where I was going to next is the character development, right? Because you're creating these arcs over time, right? Because it's not just Tim, right? It's this whole series and situation. And as you explore that character and that ecosystem, right, you have to pull in more of the surroundings to develop. Did you ever do anything with character development, or is it just as you feel and see different capacities to expand Tim, you just kind of pull those in?
I don't have it written anywhere. I don't have there's no end to the story or there's no real, it's not very deliberate. We're seeing the adventures of Tim as they happen. But, I really enjoy writing. For a while I wrote poetry. I've always been an avid reader of both fiction and nonfiction. I'm currently reading a book called The 100-Year Marathon. Really great book. It's on China and a lot of the stuff that they're doing.
Interesting.
But, I try and hit on topics that I'm passionate about. Mental health is something I'm tremendously passionate about, and you'll see that in my content from time to time. I'm using the Veteran Tim skits to talk about that kind of stuff. And it's cool to see people in the comments saying, wow, this is, basically thanks. I'm vocalizing something that helps them out.
Right. And to go back to what you said, you're saying something they're saying the same thing 1,000 different ways.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to create different mediums to make it approachable, because it still is hard to talk about mental health and frustrations and all these misgivings and, this feelings and emotions are very hard because they're personal.
Yep.
Right. As you said, you don't know what people are going through. But you present the content in a way where it allows people to be vulnerable because it's so to the point and so relatable, because they're transcendent, whether you're in a light unit, a heavy unit, infantry, AG, it doesn't matter, because those situations just constantly happen given the lifestyle that we currently live. And speaking of that, though, is you've also started to pull into more leadership content. Mm-hmm. How has that evolved in your current position?
That's a great question because, I am sure at some point I'm going to make a video and 10 years from now, I'm going to look back on it and be like, man, why did I do that? You know what I mean? Like, I didn't have a good, I understand that I don't know everything, I guess is how I should say that. And, my views are going to change over time. I am not the same person I was when I joined the military. And thankfully for everybody. But 10 years from now, I'm not going to be the same person I am now. And so, the leadership content, it comes from things that I'm passionate about. It comes from, injustices that I feel I see at times. But realistically, I want everybody to know I'm not trying to disparage anybody specifically with my content. Really, what I want to do is bring levity to some things that are very serious to some people. To a private, the petty things that we think about as just kind of whatever, they deal with it day in and day out. 12, 24, 100 petty things to a private, that's not petty anymore. You know what I mean? And I think that is something that we as leaders need to remember. Because we can forget, especially as officers, we're kind of shielded from a lot of that. We have our own issues. But, the formation changing 82 times to a private, that's really frustrating when it happens every single week,
And being able to understand that level of humility too, you're continue to bring it front of mind. So you're constantly thinking through your decision when you're going through your personal decision making. You're like, wait a second, if I were to do X, that's going to lead to all these other secondary and tertiary effects.
Yeah.
Have you seen, because you're revisiting a lot of this stuff, decisions being changed because you're bringing more humility and more gratitude to those experiences of what we'll call injustice to an extent?
Do you mean in other units?
Just in general, right? Like as you go forward, because you're constantly thinking back to, hey, I remember what it was like to be in this position, because you're in you had a unique journey where you've gone through the ranks, literally climbing from the bottom to where you are now.
Yep.
You have to look back at stuff as we've talked about and now think differently as you go to make decisions.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And, kind of my new mantra of leadership, kind of how I characterize my leadership now, is lead to the standard and lead with empathy, and you will rarely lead wrong. That's something that I'm going to keep kind of at the forefront of my mind. We have a standard, in the military. We have to abide by the standard, regardless of whether we agree with it or not. But if we apply the standard and we apply empathy, we think about, hey, how is this going to affect people? I'm not saying you need to make a different decision. You very well may make the same decision, but I think the decision will be better. And communication, man, we are terrible about communication. Everybody, me, I'm talking to myself. I'm talking to everybody. So much frustration for especially lower enlisted soldiers comes from them not understanding why they're doing something. And that is literally just a failure to communicate. And, that's something I try and think about too. I try and over communicate. I do it with my supervisors until they tell me not to, but I really do it with my soldiers because that's what I want. That's what I wanted that I didn't know that I wanted as a soldier or as a younger soldier.
Right. And that's interesting because you kind of go through as you go through like your leadership experience, and I'm still learning every day.
Yeah.
You're learning to kind of ask more than you tell.
Yep.
Because you're really seeking out those individuals and those people. And it's like, this is kind of what I'm thinking. Is this where you want to go, or do you understand? Do you do a similar thing, or like, what does that conversation look like to help relay that communication so people know they can come to you if there's a gap?
Well, the first thing, so I try and be as approachable as possible. I can for sure be the stereotypical NCO that raises his voice all the time and stuff like that, but it's just not my style. It's not what I like to do. I try and be as approachable as possible. If people come to me with problems, I always, every single time, I say the same thing. Hey, I'm here if you need to talk. I'm also here if you just tell me you need something. And, recently I had a service member who is dealing with some issues. And this person came to me and I said, if you need to talk, I'm here, but I think it would be good if you just took a couple hours to yourself right now. And, I don't know how much that meant to that person. It may have meant a little, it may have meant a lot, but that's how I like to be. That person now, I think probably feels more comfortable coming to me with things in the future. And then I also try and communicate to when I have troops, and I don't currently, I don't have anybody that I'm counseling, but I try and communicate to them that they can give me feedback when I am not giving them something that they need. As a staff sergeant, the last time I did it, I was at a warfighter at Fort Hood, and I was standing around a map with one of my soldiers, and I told this soldier, and I'm trying to keep gender and everything out of it, just so they can remain anonymous. But I told them, I said, hey, is there anything I'm not doing? Like, is there something you want me to be doing more? And this person told me, I don't really like how you teach. And I was like, man, that's huge. If you're not liking how, and I asked, do you not like how I teach, or am I not giving you what you need? And they said, well, yeah, that's why I don't like it, because you're not giving me what I need. I altered the way that I was coaching them, and they loved it. They loved it. They were able to accomplish the tasks that I need them to accomplish better. It was just overall better for everybody. And I could have been offended by them saying that, you know what I mean? But I just chose not to be, and, because at first I was like, dang, man, I've been doing this for a little while. I don't think I'm bad at it. But they weren't saying I was bad at it. They were just saying I was not communicating effectively to them,
Right. And that also goes into like from the professional realm to the personal realm, like how just by asking other people what they're looking for, expectations, and understanding that across the board is massive.
Yeah.
As you talked about, is that really something over the last number of years that has really helped shape to where you are now and improved your life? That leading more with empathy and relating to other people? Or is there something else you would say?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, first off, when you're leading well, whatever that looks like to you, everybody's happy. And when everybody's happy, the room's just light. People are getting things done. People feel like they can make mistakes and they can learn. Now, obviously, there's mistakes that we can't make. We can't do irreparable damage to property, and we can't, life, limb, and eyesight, stuff like that. But, man, if somebody uses the wrong font on a PowerPoint slide, it is not worth screaming at them about.
How you do it, keep it moving. Absolutely.
like just tell them, man, like, hey, we got to use Arial, not Calibri, and move on. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, things lose value when we are constantly at level 10 all the time. You know what I mean? And that's old school Army. Old school Army, Private Vaughn was terrified all the time. And I just don't feel that that's an effective, conducive, healthy work environment. My mentor told me, and it's the most powerful statement he's ever told me. He's a Fulbright colonel. And he said, everybody deserves to have a place that they enjoy coming to work. They deserve it. He didn't say they should have it. He said they deserve it. And so I really do think about that often when I'm interacting with people, when I'm going about my business during the day. I try and stay upbeat. I try and stay positive because it bleeds off onto other people,
How do you, when you find yourself maybe not so positive and in a place where things aren't great, how do you kind of pull yourself back, at least personally?
Gosh, I'm still not perfect at it,
Right.
I mean, last week.
None of us are. Yeah.
Last week was a stressful week for me. But a lot of times I'll try and separate myself from the situation. I will literally physically go somewhere else. I have, pictures of my phone of my kids and my wife that I'll look at. I will, when I separate myself, I'll often think, I'll try and remember the times that were worse that I've had, as a way to just, keep it in perspective. And then I also have a couple of tips that counselors have given me, some grounding techniques, stuff like that I can use too when it is really just a lot. And so I guess it's a combination of things, but probably the biggest thing is separating yourself from the environment in that moment. And then, a piece of advice that I have for people too, learn how to deal with conflict in the workplace, and don't be afraid to tell people like, hey, I really don't like how this is going right now. I don't feel comfortable with this, and kind of learn how to tactfully pump the brakes on things, when you need to.
That's a huge point too, because every time you say that isn't always going to be necessarily received the greatest, but you have to continue to own that and say, you know what, I'm going to try this way. And if it doesn't work, back to the drawing board, make a couple notes and go forward. Austin, where have you, and speaking in that sense, right? Like it's not always you win or learn, not win or fail.
Absolutely.
Where have you had a really tough learning experience that ultimately led to a great success, either personally or professionally?
Oh man. So when I got to Fort Sill, first off, I shouldn't have gotten stationed at Fort Sill because I was on profile at the time, and the order said you need to be not on profile. And so I fought so hard not to go to Fort Sill, but
everyone does.
It ended up being the greatest blessing I've ever received in my life. I got to Fort Sill. I was an S2 in COIC at a battalion, and I was effectively a brand new E5 at the time. I get there, and I'm like, man, this is going to be cush. This is a logistics battalion. They don't do intel. And I get there, and the OIC says, I am retiring in 2 months. You're the guy. And I'm like, crap. And so I also had a commander who is my mentor now, the same guy that I talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And he expected the same level out of me that he would have gotten out of a captain. And he wasn't toxic about it. Wow. He wasn't bad about it at all. And he very much personally coached me and mentored me to success. But he pushed me. He pushed me really hard. And so that was probably the hardest constructive time that I ever had in the Army. Something that, very much in a positive way made me who I am today. Definitely just in general, hardest time I had was probably at Fort Lewis. I was just gone all the time. It was a lot of late nights at work. And it was very hard on me and my family. But those are the times that I think about now when I'm getting off at a reasonable time every day. I am getting, a full lunch. I'm not having to work through lunch most days, and I had leaders that, weren't always the kindest. And so that's the time that I think back on now when I want to bring myself back to reality. Like, hey, things aren't too bad right now.
Yeah. And that gratitude too, as you continue to reinforce it, you start to see it everywhere. Just like the same way with content. After now you're starting to see, wait, that's content. That's content. That's 100%. Definitely content. That's 6 days worth of content over there.
Yeah.
As we kind of wrap up, Austin, we talked a lot about, and whether this is, physical, mental, emotional, constantly trying to seek to become better. And it's not saying you're bad where you're at. You're just
right.
looking to improve.
Yeah.
Looking at like action forcing mechanisms, or really more or less, right? Not to pull from the jargon jar, right? How are you better today than yesterday?
How I am better today than yesterday is I have a level of humility today, a level of humbleness that I didn't have as a young soldier, and especially as a Sergeant E5. I thought I had all the answers. I now know that I have very few answers. Now, my experience is something that I draw on tremendously, and it's something that I'm going to continue to draw on. Somebody who's been in the service over 10 years, they know a lot because they've experienced a lot. It's not necessarily because they're smarter. And so I would say it's kind of funny that as I've grown in experience and as I've grown in capability to solve problems, I've also become more humble. So I would tell like young troops that don't think that you are the guy. You should always be learning. You should always be trying to improve yourself and be humble. It looks better and it just is better.
How were you humbled recently?
How I was humbled recently.
Or how have you? Yeah.
I mean, as a butter bar, you just get humbled, on a daily basis. But really, how I've been humbled recently is how many new things I've encountered as a brand new officer. where I'm blown away. Because I thought for sure, I was like, man, I'm going into the officer field, the officer side of the house with 9.5 years in. And God bless. It's just been one thing after another. You know, I got my Army officer guide, you know, the thick red book. It looks like a phone book. I got that. I was reading through that. And
mine's right over there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you have one. But yeah, reading through that, seeing certain things in there, I was like, gosh, all the things that like officers do make sense now because of this book. So it's kind of funny, learning the culture, learning there's certain things that you can and can't say or should and shouldn't say as an officer versus enlisted, that kind of stuff. So I'd say that's how I've been humbled is, you know, being a brand new officer and realizing how little I knew, how much I had to learn is a huge way I've been humbled.
No, and it's a beautiful thing too, because you've gone from like essentially the author of the book, Life According to Austin, to being the librarian where you're pulling from all these different resources and understanding your experience. Hey, real recognizes real. Thank you. Austin, where can people learn more about you? Where can they go to continue to see where Mandatory Fun is day in and day out?
The best places is Instagram and TikTok, Mandatory Fun Day, all one word. That's the absolute best. And please, guys, for those of you watching this, if you follow me or you don't follow me, you're going to follow me. I love it. I love it when you guys send me messages, send me emails, comment stuff, comment the content that you want to see. I'm here for the military community. That's who I make content for. And so your suggestions are so helpful to me and really it helps me feel like I'm giving back to the community.
And you absolutely are giving back, and we're very grateful for not only you sharing your strategies, your methods, and your tactics today, but most importantly, Austin, thanks for having our six. Appreciate it, brother.
I appreciate it. Have a good one, brother.